What's up, Macadine family, and whoever is in the listening audience? I want to go into this subject that is really deep, and it's dealing with the project life and sexual promiscuity. And if you grew up in the era that I did in the 70s and 80s, so much went on under the eye of the law towards us kids. Assaults and attempt assaults and all forms of abuses that today would land parents and the assailants both in prison. So growing up in the projects in the 70s, actually in the decade of the 70s, because we moved out in 1981, August 1981, after living there for 12 years. So we were there for a minute, and during that time, these in particular projects were probably on 2 acres of land, and it housed 150 residents. So it was basically a small knit, close knit environment where we all had friends in our age groups. Everyone had friends to play with on both sides of the fence. And it was good. It had a lot of good things about it because it taught you how to get along with others and to socially interact. But based on the fact that out of those 150 families, less than five had husband and wife teams. All the other mothers were single or had seasonal boyfriends. Point blank. So the lack of a father being there, and you know the adage of that goes on right now that's being said that you're not my father, you're not my daddy, that went on back then too. So those seasonal boyfriends wouldn't interact with the sons and daughters that the woman had by other men in most cases. So there was a lack of parental guidance, so to speak, because without a father in the house, people don't realize that father represents the law and the woman represents love and mercy and kindness. So in the absence of the father who could hear the bullshit of the kid trying to manipulate the mother, can intervene and balance things out. But in the absence of father, and especially if you have an overstressed mother who's worrying about just living and surviving, and as they say, God forbid, she's on drugs or an alcoholic, and drugs wasn't on the scene then, so alcoholism was kind of strong in the projects among certain families. So without that fatherly presence, it led to all types of male and female interaction that wouldn't take place if a father was home and children had a curfew. But when summertime came and the sun went down, it went down. It really went down. All kinds of crazy conduct was taking place. It was not rare for me to run into people screwing in the back of the projects down the stairs. I ran into a threesome down the stairs, down the steps leading to the basement at one time. I mean, it was buck wild. I walked in on a rape before. You know, you see all forms. Walked in on a gangbang. All this takes place in the project life due to the fact that the projects, which means experiment, were developed, you know what I'm saying, to divide the family and to raise misfits and send them across the country or wherever they're at to continue the toxicity. So in that environment, rape was going on. and all forms of sexual promiscuity, leading to, early teenage pregnancies. But on top of that, you had the atomic bomb dropped on us called crack. And a few years before that, angel dust, which almost wiped out my generation in the area I grew up in. They called it leaky leak. And I'm telling you, brothers were losing their minds, literally. And that went on for several years. Then after that, of course, like I said, came the crack, which took it to another level. That is still, those ripples are still being felt today. And people don't realize that crack is still going strong. It just has some other drugs that have surpassed it. But it still has its lane and it still has its members. Every drug that came on the scene, after it departs in its famousness, it still has a cult following that's faithful to that God that it bows down to every day. So back to this promiscuity, I remember when we were moving out of the projects, my brother-in-law, who was about 15 years older than me, my sister was older than me, he was helping us move to the home that we were going to. So he helped me with the bed, and I went out with a couple more things. But when I came back in, he had found my naked book collection. And this brother was 15 years older than me, and he was astounded at the porn that this 15-year-old boy had in his stash. And he was stuck, talking about penetration, all the shit. In his age group, they looking at Playboy, some old girl on their back. But what I had access to, living in the project life, where sexual promiscuity and shit like that is rampant, I had a whole stack of stuff, which, of course, we didn't realize affected me down the line in relationships. Because at that young age, I'm not supposed to be generating those endorphins and dopamine at the level that I was. So down the line, I had a battle I had to overcome that I didn't even know I had. Because when you turn in these pages every day, looking at new women every day, that's set in your mind the stage for you to need more women for stimulation, a new variety all the time. So that turned on something in me, and it turns on something in many men that if they don't get it in time, it will destroy their lives. It really will. So these projects, which were actually structured after the format of the housing of mice during experiments. If you were to reduce all the projects down to around 2 feet and took the roofs off, it would look just like the housing for mice, because they experimented on mice first before they introduced the projects to mainly black people and some poor white people. They had a whole nother form of housing authority before us. These projects that were established under the presidency of John F. Kennedy were designed for us. They were scientifically designed to create homosexuals and social misfits. If you do a survey and ask how many millionaires did the projects produce, I guarantee you it'd be about 30. And those are mainly basketball players, not to sound stereotypical against my own kind, but that's the truth. So all over America, now just imagine the projects I came from with only 150 residents is nothing but a microcosm compared to Cabrini Greens in Chicago that had 4,000 families living in their projects. And like Cabrini Green, you can go back to the projects that I came from and you will find those who are generational residents. Their mother was there, their grandmother was there, and they're there. So this is all part of an experiment. When they log in to all the former residents and see that This amount died from drug overdoses. This amount died from AIDS. This amount did life in prison. See, they know how this is going to turn out because this was the stage that they set. Knowing that man by nature is never supposed to be in near proximity with somebody that close, on top of him and beside him. That in itself causes hostility and animosity by nature because it opposes our sovereign nature. So not only does sexual malfunction and disease come out of the project life, but also violence, domestic violence, tendencies to violence, unrestrained behaviors, alcoholism with a liquor store on each corner. See, the stage is set to destroy us. But those of us who have survived, those of us who still have our health, we have a responsibility. And that's why I'm on my square doing the best I can from my vantage point. So I urge all of you to understand the nature of projects because they're still going on. The project is just getting more and more advanced to take more and more of our people and poor people in general out the picture. More later in peace.